Afternoon all, I'd like to show you Nakamura's first ever win against a Grandmaster. We go back to the year 1998, the Somerset ACN Action Swiss. His opponent is Arthur Bisguer, a great veteran of American chess. Bisguer won 2 US championships, junior championships, in 1948 and 49, 3 US Open championships in 1950, 56 and 59. The 1954 United States champion title was his. He played for the United States in 5 Olympiads. He also played in 2 interzonal tournaments in 1955 and 62. So a great veteran, and United States Chess Federation have proclaimed him the Dean of American chess. Hikaru was a total youngster at 2201 at the time of this game. In fact, he was just 10 years old, 117 days. Okay, Arthur kicked off with d4. Hikaru chose the King's Indian defense. So after bishop g7, e4, d6, and we see now bishop g5, an Averbach type system. After castles, now we see quite an unusual move, f4. So it's like a combination of a 4-pawns attack with this bishop g5, which is usually for positional motives. Now the way Naka reacts is very interesting. He plays c5, going for dark square pressure, d5, and now he plays extremely energetically in this position, sensing the position's quite unusual with the bishop here. A slight difference from an ordinary 4-pawns attack. With the bishop on g5, b2 might be slightly looser here. There's also this case of the f-pawn loosening a bit this diagonal. So there's 2 key points which I believe Naka's next move kind of try and tap into. He plays actually b5, gambiting a pawn. White doesn't of course want to take with the knight to lose the centre pawn, so White takes this, otherwise b4 is annoying, and now a6 carrying on energetically. White takes this, and now bishop takes, and now Naka plays knight takes a6. So what has he got for the pawn? Well, he's trying to emphasise really this diagonal and b2 and the b file generally. And after knight f3, this key move here, queen b6, sits on both of those weaknesses for White. So it's kind of annoying for White here. It's time for lesser evil type moves. In fact, Black has more than enough for the pawn. White could consider, for example, sacrificing the b pawn by castling, or more simply just protecting the b pawn, which at first though seems to carry its own kind of risks. If queen d2 is played, we might have knight g4, which is quite annoying. For example, if White just routinely castles, then actually Black has some tricks here in this position. c4 check, and then knight c5, and these knights could potentially coordinate on f2. For example, if rook ae1, knight d3, rook e2, rook fb8, this is really quite intense pressure building up. So in the game anyway, White played actually rook b1, which condemns for a little longer the king in the centre now. c4 is played, just opening up that diagonal. And it's difficult for White to kind of get rid of this nuisance queen on b6 now. He plays queen e2. Now after rook fc8 protecting that pawn, perhaps White should try bishop takes f6 here to avoid any nuisance knights. For example, bishop takes e5, takes, bishop g7, and now queen f2, just to parry this annoying queen. It's a case of having to play lesser evil moves, but in the game we see queen f2, which, although it looks promising in some respects to encourage the exchange of queens and to be able to castle, it has a major tactical issue associated with it. Nakamura just plays knight c5 here, seemingly allowing White the gift of castling, But unfortunately, white now castles, but there's a huge penalty to be paid from the 10-year-old. He plays knight g4, and this diagonal is really, really sensitive. The queen moves to e2. Where else? The bishop was covering d4, so this means now there's a dreaded discovered check, winning a pawn. And the worst is not over, unfortunately, for Arthur. After king h1, he's having to lose the exchange now as well. Nakamura plays knight gf2, and after king g1, maybe he'd hope that his young opponent would go for some sort of perpetual check here. Well, actually, after knight h3 check, king h1, Nakamura uses actually now this other knight, because this knight's stopping king g1, so he forces the win of the exchange. And it just gets worse now. After winning the exchange, after knight takes king g1, now it becomes clear that it's completely and utterly hopeless, because black just plays now knight e4 check. And if the king moves, well, white actually resigned here, but if the king moved, then knight takes c3, and this is an unprotected rook on b1. So a fairly devastating defeat of Arthur Bisguer. But to be fair, he was getting on a bit, and but even so, for a 10-year-old to play so energetically and dynamically shows that this was a 10-year-old on his way up, and very good tactically and very good at generating pressure. He transformed the opening into a kind of Benko gambit, an improved version of the Benko gambit, where white's weaknesses and king safety were exposed dramatically. Comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.